All right, so I call this week's lesson, Limitation Will Set You Free. And I wanted to give it a title that would grab your attention, but also be truthful. That's what we're going to be talking about. This is not clickbait. We're going to be looking at a very limited set of parameters in one region of the fretboard and how you can play a meaningful sounding lead out of that area. And the reason I'm doing that, and I like to come back to these lessons from time to time because they always seem to resonate with people. And I know where you're at. I know it's very overwhelming when you're learning how to improvise. You have all the notes of the fretboard and you're trying to figure out kind of, should I be over here? Should I be over here? Should I be following the chord changes? Should I be playing arpeggios? You have all these options. And there's theory and all this stuff. And so what ends up happening is your head gets in the way. But what if we limited what you could do and you only get 5 notes? Well, actually, there'll be a few more than that, but one little area, we'll just call it that. One little area, we all get the same area, and that's it. You can't go outside of that. Then what you end up doing is you end up playing more expressively with those notes. And so it's not necessarily going to be a technical lesson. We're not going to be doing anything technical. We're not even going to be talking about theory. We're just going to be limiting ourselves to one region. And once you can start to hear it and feel it, then you can start advancing into other areas. But it starts with that feeling it and getting it. So if you've ever been trying to understand how it works when you improvise, this would be a great lesson to jump in on, because I think by the end of this video you'll be able to do it. At least you'll be able to hear it, and you should be able to do it and follow along. So in this video we're going to define the parameters and we're going to talk about them, and we're also going to play through the first half of that jam track that I played in the intro. If you'd like to join us for part 2 and also download the tablature and the MP3 jam track, which is a really cool bass line that you can play on top of, you can get all of those extra things by going to activemelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page, and do a search for EP495. Oh, and one other thing to mention, if you like this video as we're going through it, just give me a thumbs up or even leave a comment. I always appreciate those. Okay, so when I say limitation set you free, like what does that mean? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to limit ourselves to basically 5 notes. We're going to add a couple extras to that, but it's the pentatonic scale really, but in one position. We're not going to be playing on all these patterns all over the fretboard, just one region. And that's what this is all about, is limiting ourselves to that region so that when there's new chords that you're playing against, for example, or when the bass line in the jam track does other things, doesn't matter. We're not worrying about any of that. We're just trying to make music with these notes. And so what you find yourself doing is, instead of just playing the notes, because you've just got a few, you end up like sliding into notes and doing half bends, doing hammer-ons, doing vibratos, doing these little nuances that the human voice does, and that's what gives your sound its flavor. It makes you sound like you, is those little nuances. And those nuances get lost, I think, when you're trying to play all over the fretboard, or it's easy to kind of overlook the important stuff. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on, is that. So let me explain the key that we're going to be in. We're going to be playing an A minor. So we've got it's really like a 1-4-5 in A minor, but it's a minor one. So it's an A minor. And then we have a D minor for our 4 chord, so a minor 4 chord, A minor, D minor. And then we go to a major 5 chord, which is our E. So it's an E7. So it's actually A minor 7, D minor 7, E7. I'll put the chords up as we get into it, but that's what we're playing on top of. Now, the parameter that we're going to be looking at looks like this. We're going to start with this A note here. That's our 7th fret, 4th string, and we're going to play this. We're going to play 7, and then we're going to come up to the 3rd string and play 5, 7, and then we're going to come up to the 2nd string and play 5, 8. Those notes. If you can play those notes, you're already halfway there. You've got all the tools you need. It's that simple. Now, these notes, in case you're wondering where they come from, these are minor pentatonic scale pattern 1. That's where they're coming from. And this would be A minor pentatonic scale, because there's our A minor chord where we're barring here on the 5th fret, and you can see your minor pentatonic scale is in that area. So that's where this is coming from, are those notes. At least that's how we're going to start this. We're going to add a few extra notes to that, which will convert that into a different scale. I'll explain that as we get into it. But just trust me for now. It's those 5 notes that we're going to be starting with for our parameter. Let's listen to the first part, get that sound in our head, and then we'll talk through what's going on. So the song started with the 5 chord, which was our E7, and I just played it like that. I'll put that chord up on the screen. I just brushed it. By the way, I'm using my fingers. I'm not using a pick as I do this. Why did I choose to do that? It's another limitation. Now you can follow me with that or not. Some of you are pick players and you're married to that pick, and I totally get it. But I would encourage you to just use your fingers. You know why? It's because you're limited. You can't play as fast. You've got just limited parameters. We're trying to just take things out of the way that might seduce us to go into something that we would have done before. So it's a little more awkward for me to play with my fingers, and so that's why I'm doing it. But it's also more expressive. You get that. So with a finger, I can pop the string in a way that I can't with the pick, and also the flesh on the string sounds different than the plastic on the string. It's just a different tone. Okay, so I started with the 5 chord, which was our E7, and then I went into this. So let me explain that. I'll explain the timing part and all of that, but let's look at what's going on there. We're starting on that 7th fret 4th string, and we're just going to walk right up the parameter that I explained to you. So we're going to go 7th fret 4th string, we're going to go 3rd string and go 5, 7, and then up to the 5th fret 2nd string. So we're going to walk up it, and then we're going to go back down. So we're going to go 7, 5 on the 3rd string, back to the 7th fret, and then 7th fret 4th string. So that's the first line. And that's using the parameter that we talked about. Now, that sounds a little bit dull on its own if I played it like that. But what if we thought about some of those notes? And keep in mind, you can slide into any of those notes to give it a different feel. So that first note, I slid into it. Just that one subtle thing. It doesn't seem like much, but it's already giving it a little bit of a unique quality, more of a human voice kind of quality. You're sliding in like you're trying to find the note that you would do, vocally. Now, I could have went like this. I could have slid into any of those notes. I'm just throwing that out there just to give you an idea. Maybe you knew that, maybe you didn't. It seems like a note, like some of you are just going, yeah, okay, whatever, you slide into a note. But these little nuances add up and they mean a lot. It's what gives you your sound. Now, as far as timing on that comes in on the and of 1. So if we're counting this in, for those of you that are wanting to know when to start this when you're playing along with the jam track, it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. And then that starts the 1 right there. Now after that I went and played the chord. Now I'm just brushing it with my thumb, and I think I did 4 of them, sort of a crescendo. I started soft and then kind of built to a crescendo. Now the way that I'm playing the chord, it's an A minor 7 chord, and so I'm just barring all 6 strings here on the 5th fret with my index finger, and then I've got my ring finger on the 7th fret 5th string. And that's an A minor 7, really easy chord to make. And I played it like that. Now you could play it a little different each time when you play the chord. And so if you think about this, it's really a call and response. That's what the format is. So the call, and then the response. And now we're going to do another call. And then another response. You can make those responses whatever you want. It could have been like upstrokes on the thumb if you want to give it more of like a reggae vibe or whatever. I'm going to leave that up to you. But that's what I did. It was like a... And so the second time I played just those notes. And then the response. So you can see those notes on the screen. Make sure you add a little vibrato, however you want to do vibrato. Some of you will use a tremolo for that. That's totally cool. There's different vibrato techniques, but just try and make it sound like you're singing. You're singing with your fingers when you do this. Now there's all kinds of different ways I could have expressed myself with those 3 notes. I could have done a hammer-on, right? I could have went like that, little trill where I'm going up a fret and coming back. I mean, there's all kinds of little things you could do, little inflections. So you play around with it. and find something that sounds good to you. There's no right answers with this stuff. Just stick to the parameters though. Don't get overwhelmed with the other stuff. Just try and stay in that zone. Okay, so now the song goes to the 4 chord, which is a D minor 7. So we keep that bar there on the 5th fret, and then we've got our middle finger on the 6th fret 2nd string, our ring finger on the 7th fret 4th string. That's how you play, and just play strings 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. That's a D minor 7. It's the same thing as your D minor chord like this, like using that A minor shape, but you take your pinky out of it. And so it just gives it a little more mellow vibe there. And what I played to get into that was, and then into the response. Now the response, I didn't always do 4. I think when I was just listening back to that, I think I went just like 1, 2, 3, or maybe 2, 1, 2. But you get the point. It's just hitting the chord as a response. So the notes that I'm playing for that are very similar to what we've already done. We've got slide from the 5th fret to the 7th fret on the 4th string, 5th fret 3rd string, 7th fret 3rd string. Now watch this. There's a bend, a full bend. It's actually somewhere between a full bend and a half bend. It doesn't really matter. Just bend that note and then give it some vibrato. So it's like, and then you play your 4 chord as the response. And then that next lick goes like this. Now see, there's a technique there. That's all done with a pull off and a hammer on and a bend. Bend, release, pull off, hammer on. These are little techniques that you might miss if you're playing all over the fretboard. You'd be too busy trying to figure out something else. But like if I'm stuck to these parameters, I start doing things that are maybe a little more creative than I would have otherwise. That's the hope anyway. So it's like this. Between the 5th fret and the 7th fret on the 3rd string, bend, release, pull off, hammer onto the 7th fret 4th string. And then a little vibrato there on the 5th fret 3rd string. And then the response is back to the A minor. So that's where we go back to that A minor. All right, so this is where the song would go to the 5 chord, which is our E7. But if you'll notice, what ended up happening was it went up a half step, and then to the 5, and then back to the 1. Now that's a very common technique you hear in the blues a lot. When you go to that 5 chord, you go up a half step. So in this case, a half step up from E is an F, so that would be an F7. And then you go down to the E, and then you go back to your 1 chord, which is A minor. And you hear that in like Thrill Is Gone is a good example of that, where when it comes to the 5 chord, it goes up a half step, it goes down, and then back to your minor 1 chord. Now, to mirror what's going on there, I played this. And that note fits perfectly over that 5 chord. Now, why did I choose to do that? Well, first of all, I could hear it with my ear. So that's getting out of the parameters. Now, this is one of those extra notes. So there's going to be 3 extra notes that we're going to cover as we go through this. This is one of those 3. And so in our minor pentatonic scale, which looks like that, if we add this note, so you come up here to that 7th fret 3rd string and you go up 1 note, which would be the 8th fret 3rd string. That note, if we add that note to our minor pentatonic scale, we've created a new scale now. We have now the blues scale. So that note is called a blue note. And when you add that note to your minor pentatonic scale, you get the blues scale. And so that's what I'm doing, is hitting that note. Now that note also happens to be inside that F7 chord. So it fits perfectly over that. And I could hear that chord and I knew I wanted to kind of fudge this note to go up a half step. And so that's really all I was doing, is I was just trying to kind of to match that. So I hit that note, played the F7, slide it down to the E7, and then the final lick goes. And so that lick is one we've already done. It's between the 5th fret and the 7th fret on the 3rd string. A bend, release, pull off, hammer on. It's that same little technique. And then I hit that 5th fret 3rd string. And then the final note there is the 7th fret 4th string. And then we go back to the response to that, which is our A minor 7. Okay, that's one full cycle of playing over that bass jam track. And I hope you've picked up a few ideas for the benefits of limiting yourself and not trying to do everything. You just take a few notes and see what you can do with those notes. Now in the part 2 video, we're going to continue this. We're going to play over that same jam track, but we're going to introduce a few new things. We're going to have 2 extra notes that we're going to add to this little parameter that we've got, and we're also going to talk about bending strings. And so those are some extra things we're going to work into the part 2 video. You can get all the extra materials, the MP3 jam track for this, that part 2 video, and then the tablature, and also the interactive tab viewer by going to activemelody.com and go to the weekly lessons page, which is a link at the top. And then you could search for this lesson, which is EP495. And while you're there, check out all the other lessons. I've got 10 years worth of in-depth lessons, just like this one. And you can always watch the part 1 video. You can check those out in any of the lessons. Those are all free. And we'll give you an idea if Active Melody is a good fit for you. And hopefully you'll see, if you're liking this video, hopefully you'll see the value in the other ones and consider joining us. All right, the last thing I'll say is if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, just click the subscribe button, click that alert bell, and then we can be in touch with each other, and you can be notified when I put out new lessons, which I do every week. All right, we'll see you in part 2.